Right. Ready?
I'm ready.
8 seconds.
Actually, can you pause for a sec, or can you not?
Yep.
Give me a sec. There we go.
Ready?
I am.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, all right. What's up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Office Hours. Don't worry about it. Today we're talking about pitching. As always, I'm Garrett Dailey. This is Brian Schuster, and we are Lucid Consulting. So, one of the things that we do at Lucid that has more or less become our bread and butter is helping people with pitch decks and the act of fundraising. And this is something that a lot of people really struggle with. It's complicated. It's often long and tedious and soul crushing. And it's made harder for technical founders with complicated products. So this is,
and there's a paradox, funny enough, where it seems like the more competent the individual is who seems to be building this product, like their ability to execute on a product, understand it, build a team, for some reason that doesn't solve the pitching problem. In some cases, it actually makes it worse, right? So you get this phenomenon, which is, I'm shocked there's a market here. I never would have thought there was a market here, but after meeting Garrett and going through this, there is. Very smart, competent, capable people with great backgrounds, great teams, focusing on great problems, can't get funding, and everyone is really confused, right? It's like, but that exists. That's out there. Sorry for interrupting, but that's a really thing that's really important here.
Yeah, it's very common. You get these technical people that so the way that I usually explain it is like, if you're pitching a laundromat, you should have no difficulty. If you are having difficulty pitching a laundromat, you've screwed something up. You've something wrong, because everyone knows what a laundromat is. And it's a business model that already exists and works and is very reliable. It's actually one of the most reliable business models of all time. Most people are not pitching laundromats, right? You're probably not raising venture capital for a laundromat because that model is stable, cash flowing. It's a predictable thing. It doesn't require a huge amount of growth investment other than buying a bunch of washing machines and paying rent, right? So instead, when you have real problems in the world, they are usually complicated, and solutions to real problems, real solutions, are often also complicated. And this is something that I notice our real ideal person that we help with this is a B2B company with a technical product, right? Usually seed or Series A. If you get past Series A and you still are having trouble explaining what you're doing, there's probably something wrong. We don't normally find that people, pitching becomes different at later stages. And a lot of that is follow on. And a lot of that is based on your metrics and stuff, not the content.
One of the things is that I think one of the problems here is that seed and Series A companies that are raising funds don't have enough traction that it becomes patently obvious they're right. Right? It's like they're early stage things. They usually have, again, all the things are true, but it's not like they have a huge amount of revenue. It's not like they have a huge number of clients, right? Even like sometimes you even have huge names everyone knows who basically get added on, but there's still this chance of like, well, that's a great name, that's a great logo, but it could be a one-hit wonder sort of situation, right? To do that. That's usually the case for seed and Series A. By the time you get to B, C, and D, it should be like, okay, there needs to be way more to prove that it's out there, right? You should be a known thing. And if it's not a known thing, or if it's not a growing, sustained enterprise at that point, there's other problems underneath the hood.
Yeah, so for everyone watching, we're not going to be talking really even mostly about like Series A or beyond. this information should be useful to pre-seed, seed, Series A people. Probably more so pre-seed, seed, but typically we don't work with pre-seed people because you can be a pre-seed and have no validation whatsoever. If you have no traction, then you're gambling on the idea being good, which oftentimes that investment is done because people like you and trust you, not because they even necessarily get your idea or believe that it will work, but they believe in you. So you can, as a rule, you generally can look at like pre-seed investment is in the person, seed investment is in the idea, and I think A is like in the traction, right? Something to that effect. So
well, usually like traction, you should have, okay, it should be user growth. You should prove user or company should be growing. That doesn't mean you're profitable. It doesn't even mean you're close to profitable, but the real numbers should be emerging by your Series A.
Right. So when we're looking at this this stuff, you know, seed pitches for technical products are usually done incorrectly because the person pitching focuses on how the technical thing works. As a rule in sales, something I like to say is your job is to explain how it works for them, not how it works, right? If you are explaining how something works, you at best get it's always a 3-step process, right? Hey, first you do this, then you do this, then good things happen, right? Put your t-shirt in the t-shirt cannon, shoot the t-shirt cannon. You've now shot the t-shirt cannon, right? Like it's always a 3-step process. It doesn't matter how many steps there are. But what's more important is talking about how product features create benefits for the user, right? Or service features if you're a service. What people tend to spend a lot of their time doing in the deck is explaining the technology, and that makes the logical part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, or the neo-mammalian cortex, start turning on. And this is where logic is done. This is not where sales are made, right? Sales are made further back in the monkey and the lizard brain, right? This is the human brain in the front. And you basically, as a function of pitching, you want to be focusing on ethos and pathos, meaning ethos is authority or what people believe your value is based on other people's opinions. Pathos is emotion, right?
Yeah. And actually, I think for specifically technical B2B founders, because again, as a developer, I understand this, and this is something where I feel like I haven't, you are not technical, Garrett, so you don't fall into this trap, versus with me, I very much do, right? Which is like, okay, so if you're an engineer or you have an engineering background, you're a very engineering heavy team, you will see a problem and you'll struggle with it for a long time, right? You'll look at this thing like that's exactly what happened with one of our clients, where it's like they came up with their idea for their business like 15 years ago. And most of that time was just trying to make the idea and get it working, right? So you spend a lot of time getting into that. And then finally, when it becomes evident that it's going to happen, to you, it's a solved problem, right? You're like, oh my God, this is right here. This is right. It's here. And so your tendency to go to other people and start to explain it to them. And again, for most people, this works because most people you're not trying to get investment to is this, oh, there's this really hard technical problem I solved here, and here's these issues, and let me go through it. And your brain just kind of just goes, right, where all the details fly out there, right? Because you're talking about this, you're talking about how to solve the problem, right? Like, and you said, oh, we had this technical issue and we solved this, but because we brought this in, it solved this or whatever. And it kind of splays out. And most people will be smile and go, and maybe they're Greeky, they agree, right? But those same people will go into a meeting and they or a pitch event or a investor pitch, and they'll go and say, they know they have to be selling something else, right? And they'll go and look online and say, oh, we need to talk about the market size or whatever. But when it comes down to what really excites them and makes them passionate, it's about the actual solved problem and all the time and energy they put into that. And the problem is that's like a death trap in the middle of the investor meeting, right? The thing you should be really getting the investor pointed towards is, here's the market opportunity. Here's why this is going to be massive. Here's the product and team we're putting together to go and solve that. You don't have to be, what you should be saying is, you can look at the details. We have it solid, but we have it covered. That's why you're giving us money, right? And move on to it. versus the engineer wants to go, no, stop. Here's all the things on how we did, and here's how we got the XR to work, and here's how we got this bus to go through, and do this. And the fact is, no one else really cares. Short aside here, there is a wonderful book called Atari Games Are Fun, I think it's called, or whatever. It's one of the most unique business books that's ever been created because it's a series of short stories that go through the history of Atari and whatever. But pretty much anyone who ever worked at Atari back when it was being founded in the 70s could write a chapter. So somebody actually in their engineering team decided to write a chapter about the Atari 2600 and the bus. Like the literal bus on the chip to do this. So you're reading the story of all these different accounts, and then one guy literally gives a 20-page technical account. Like, I'm not even talking about high level. I mean, literally the pin outputs and how they solve this problem for 20 pages on, and then comes through. When you're a technical founder and you're pitching and you go into the technical details, you're basically the guy who authored that chapter in that book that goes through this technical detail that you and like 5 other engineers find exciting, but no one else really cares about, and they're not really sure why we're talking about this stuff other than it's a minute detail, right? Most of the pitch is trying to get founders out of that mode and into the, no, let's talk about what they actually care about.
Yes. And I think that's essentially your loose arc of what you're doing in the pitch, saying something has changed in the world. When there is a change, that creates problems and it creates opportunities, right? If you don't capitalize on the change, you're going to have problems. If you do, you will be more successful than other people, right? So something has changed in the world. If you get them to believe this thing has changed, you've already gotten a yes. They're agreeing with your premise, right? And the series of yeses you're trying to get before you ever even get to actually pitching and asking for money at the end, allow them to start buying in. So you want to present a premise about the way the world is, right? Which is the nature of all stories every day. Hey, once upon a time, there was a big happy kingdom, right? That's a premise about the world. We're making a statement about the story that we're about to hear. Then one day there was a black cloud that hung over the castle, right? And no one knew why. Okay, there's a change that creates a problem, but then also creates opportunity, right? Everyone was very sad and everyone thought the cloud would stay forever, right? So in this, we would say, winners and losers and good future, bad future are 2 parts that you're trying to do here. So you're trying to create an identity for the person you're pitching of, here's the person I want you to identify with. This is the hero of the story, which is you, who does what we're asking them to do. You give us money and then we all win. And the villain of the story, or the loser, is the person who doesn't listen, doesn't act the way that you want. And the winner gets the good future, then the loser gets the bad future. So everyone who doesn't do anything and sits under the black cloud in the castle is the loser, and the bad future is it's always going to be depressing, right? But then one day, somebody decided to go figure out where the black cloud was coming from, right? We have our winner, and they're going to go find the good future so they can get rid of it. And they went on a long and interesting quest and discovered the staff of truth and used that to banish the black cloud, right? You introduce features, product features, as magic gifts for overcoming obstacles to the promised land. Or more simply, your product gets you the good future, right? It solves any problems that you laid out earlier in the deck by addressing them directly. So that brings us into something that I call like the rule of 3, which is you should figure out what your 3 core premises are that you're trying to drill in the deck and use those 3 things repeatedly. So at the beginning, you talked about there's a change in the world that creates an opportunity. There are 3 factors that create an opportunity. You need a financial incentive, a technological possibility, and social desire, right?
Yeah.
It has to be profitable, it has to be possible, and people have to want it, right? So an example of an opportunity that satisfied 2 out of 3 of these is that stupid rabbit thing, the AI little box. I don't understand what it is or what it does. It looks dumb. Everyone who used it said it was dumb, right? It was economically viable in the sense that, there was money that somebody paid to build this thing, and it's technologically possible. They could do it. They did do it. But it turns out that nobody wanted it. right? They're so concerned with whether they could that nobody stopped to ask whether they should. So you see, when you take out one of the three legs of the opportunity triangle, like, it doesn't work. It's not stable.
Right.
You need it. Somebody has to be able to pay for it. It has to be technically possible, and people have to want it. It has to solve a social need, right? Those 3 points, then you can echo later and say, okay, well, there's a lot of money to spend on, there's a lot of money that needs to be spent into advancing AI, and AI technology is evolving by the day, right? Week to week, it's crazy. People are really excited about the opportunities for AI to be in products. In reality, like consumer level, they are not interested in AI very much. It's not, most people consider AI as a product feature to decrease the value of the product that you're pitching currently. VCs are different. VCs love to hear AI in pitches currently, and maybe that's on the way out.
And when you're done with your point, I have something very important to mention about this in relation to this, but yeah, continue on. Say again?
Go ahead, and I'll jump back in.
The fact is that, look, the thing you've mentioned here is that you need to make this case that there's this big, overwhelming change that's happening in the world. And the stronger you can make that case, or the more obvious it is, the easier time you're going to have to actually raise. So I was writing a lead generator today that I think, actually, I don't know if it's a talk or a lead generator or whatever, but it's a very good subject to talk about, which is why do most B2B technical folks seem to fail at raising versus why do some people why is it so easy for others? If I had to think of somebody who doesn't have problem raising, people who do not have trouble raising, it's pretty much the OpenAI cohort, right? That just came out, right? And here it's like, basically you have Sam Altman, who's now literally trying to raise $7 trillion. Trillion. He's a lunatic, but like
the TSMC laughed at him. I thought that was pretty funny.
Oh yeah, right. They kept calling him podcast boy, basically, or whatever, something like that, which is so humiliating. And yeah, anyway, we'll move on. But what's interesting is the other guys who have left. Ilya is one of their co-founders, right? I think he was their chief scientist, or he's like an engineering guy. So he left, he put up an HTML website, literally no CSS thing, and says, we're going to make the safest AI possible. And he raised $1 billion off that. Not $1 billion valuation. He got $1 billion to go and start this company. Now, this is really instructive because it says, okay, why was that company so easy to fund, right? To do this. And it's like, well, you can say he was really, really smart. I'm thinking, yes, that's true, but there's many, many smart people who don't raise, right? You could say that, well, he just came off of a really hot startup to go through this, and now he's he's shown to be successful, which, granted, that is true. But I think there's why was it, there's probably a lot of successful startups where a founder splits off and it doesn't really necessarily get the attraction, or he doesn't get $1 billion thrown at them a week later, right? They have to go through a traditional route. He literally just had the money, thrown at him by Catapult, right? To go invest it. It's like, well, do they have a great team? No, they don't have a great team because they haven't hired anyone. Do they have a great product? No, they don't have a product because it basically just said it's safe AI. What does that mean? They don't know. Yet $1 billion of capital went to that. What actually happened? And this is what I want to propose actually is the real case here, which is Ilya is an unusually smart person, but he's very, very well positioned at the forefront of the AI revolution, which is something that investors have accepted is going to change the world, has had its breakout moment. No one has to be convinced in the investor field that AI is going to change the world and that there's going to be plenty of opportunities. They all believe it. It's stamped in their head that this is such a massive change that it's going to do that. And he was so well positioned to ride that wave that it was obvious that he's going to make money. Now, when I say obvious, it may not be true. He could lose all of it, but to the investors, that doesn't matter. To them in their head, the story was already implanted. The real thing that made it $1 billion raise as opposed to 100 million or 10 million, whatever, was the fact that he was raising for an AI company right at the edge of this wave, right, to do this. The real winner here is not him. It's the AI revolution. It's the AI wave. That's the thing that made it $1 billion raise, not the details about his individual company. I'm going to pause here, Garrett, because I can see some.
Yeah, I think broadly that's correct, but you have another factor here that's really relevant, which is his prior success at OpenAI, right? So this is all of the stuff that you said is true, but none of this would happen if he was not, from OpenAI which also is a widely publicized company that gets talked about once a week.
That's true.
It has for the past several years, right, with a huge valuation, then this would not work as well. However, there are a lot of people that have raised in the last 2 years on, vaporware AI projects, right? Or even things where they built a stupid piece of physical hardware like the Rabbit that just doesn't do anything useful that anyone wants, right? So I think that's the one thing that you want to consider. And this is actually the test case here for this. This is a huge ethos sale. They are raising off of the authority, the ethos, the perceived authority of Ilya. That being said, the pathos of this sale is the story that AI is dangerous and thus OpenAI is not doing enough to be protective of it. Now that creates basically what they're doing is creating a new category in which they can be dominant, right? OpenAI was supposed to be this friendly, open kind of thing, and it's not anymore. They have changed their position in the market, but there is a position created by the safe AI company that we're the first safe AI company. Right. But in reality, they will not dominate the market because OpenAI will dominate the market. They already control the position one, right? So
it's theirs to lose, basically.
Yeah. OpenAI can only lose their position, but right now they dominate and will probably continue to dominate because Sam Altman is a sociopath. But
correct.
But that's a good point. Really having ethos is more important. And actually another great case for this is the WeWork guy, Adam Newman. Adam Newman raised, a stupid nonsensical $1 billion for something. I forgot what his company was, but it's that because he has the clout as someone that could do it and also is crazy enough to ask for a ridiculous amount of money, then he could do it. And there's something to be said, if you watch, you read about when SBF got funded. I think he was playing World of Warcraft during their meeting, or League or Dota or something.
He was playing League and he was bronze tier. I just want everyone to know that about him. I don't play the game. I don't care, but he was shitty at it despite playing it all the time.
Yeah, well, at any rate, he was in their investor call, he was also playing League.
Yes.
And so when you realize wow, they invested in a guy who was playing a game on a call, you realize this is not a rational game that makes any sense at all. Should they have not invested in SBF? 100%. The dude is literally a criminal, right? But did they? And did they invest tons of money? Yes, they did. So the point that you should take away from this is not go play League in your call. The point that you should take away from this is that this is not a rational game that is won by explaining things logically, right? In fact, many illogical things, investing in a company with no product whatsoever, one person, right? Investing in a guy who is historically kind of a nutcase and investing in a guy who's playing a video game on a call, all of these people commanded massive investments, right? So you're up against, and this is why technical founders struggle, you are up against a system that is not logical, or at least is not logical in the way that engineering is logical, right?
It's a different model on how they think about it. That's not compatible with engineering thinking.
Yes. And that is the most important thing that you have to understand is that it's not going to work the way that building a product works. Building a product has rules, right? You have to get social feedback and stuff, but you can plenty of products have been built that never ship, but you can build a product purely on logic alone. I have a series of rules that create the code that runs through a series of rules in the server to get streamed to people like that. It's all logical, all makes sense. And there is a logic to pitching, but it is not traditional logic. It's the psychology of a pretzel. It's weird, human, twisty, confusing psychology. And when you start to open your mind to letting go of your desire for it to make sense the way you want it to make sense, and for people to understand that your product is good and thus give you money, then you start to be free to pitch correctly. Which is a huge thing. That's a huge overcoming thing because this is also why generally your developers and your salespeople are two different people, right? This is generally the case. It's very rare you get a great developer who is also a great people person, right?
It's extraordinarily difficult because you have different systems in play here, right? It's kind of like I mean, if I had to use a technical example, right, it's like if you have an application developer and that sort of individual, it's rare that they're also going to be like a great networking engineer because the mental models that exist on both of those are so dramatically different. They're not compatible, right? They're well, obviously one connects to the other, right? But it's a very different type of thinking, right? It's the same thing with sales too. And it's also hard to be good, right? Like it's hard to be somebody who builds a great product and then goes off and sells it, right? One requires a very different view of the world than the other, and it's very hard to switch between the two. Like it's not impossible, it's just you have to be very deliberate about it.
Yeah. So you're going to be deliberate about it in the process of learning how to do this. What are you doing, right? We mentioned that you need to have, there's a change. Everything in the pitch is relative to the change in the world. What Brian touched on somewhat is that you need to name the change. You literally put a label on the change. And if you do this correctly, you own that label, and thus people associate you with this concept. So, not all cases are you able to do this like totally perfectly, right? If, I don't know if any particular person was associated with naming the Industrial Revolution or the atomic age, maybe, Oppenheimer, but like that, it wasn't pitching really, he was pitching the government to give him money.
Right.
But you want to be able to put a name on a certain era or age or revolution or crisis or some change. You label it, because what you're doing is creating the language to share the discussion in. You need to have shared language to get people on the same page. And if the language doesn't exist for the thing yet, then the person who makes it gains a tremendous amount of power because they associate you with that concept naturally, right? Apple, I believe, invented, maybe I'm wrong, personal computing, right? Although people associate PCs with Macs. Like, I feel like
I'm looking that up. I actually I don't know
Windows,
actually.
yeah, I don't know. I thought like the Mac was like the first personal computer, but I could be totally wrong. But I know PC is what we call Windows, right?
Actually, I think that's wrong, but not in the direction you think. IBM.
Really.
IBM came it up in 1973. That's when it was coined.
But who took it to market?
Define market. Like
Like, who I guess Windows won that game, right?
yeah, well, they did. Well, Windows won the war, but again, like they provided the OS for the personal computers. Technically, IBM kind of did, but it was a war. It was a war not worth winning because okay, side tangent. The big battle that happened at the beginning of the personal computing era, right, when small computers were there, were closed systems versus open systems. That's what kind of emerged. Apple is a closed system. This is a closed system. This is they own everything. They own the software, hardware, whatever. And back then, the Macintosh and even like, early like Apple, the early Apple, like they were moving towards that closed architecture. IBM basically decided we're going to do, let's call it an open architecture, right? Where we're going to take off the shelf things. We're going to go to Intel and grab this. We're going to grab them here. And they're going to put a computer together. And then they're going to put an operating system inside of that then runs it and goes it, and you buy those things there, right? So that's the very early era of what's going on. Windows won because they ended up, because IBM standard won out, right? We didn't have really computers like Macs, right? Or even other closed systems. We had PCs. We had lots of manufacturers of these PCs, but they were all like using off-the-shelf parts and doing whatever. And they had their own configurations or whatever. So like IBM won in the sense that people adopted the open standard, not the closed standard, but IBM couldn't capitalize on that, right? It's not like there was a patentable thing. So you ended up getting competitors like Compaq and all the other like, computer manufacturers coming out to do that. And so they really couldn't capture a lot of the value. So they invented it, but they couldn't capture the value. Windows ended up capturing a lot of value because they were able to sell the OS, which IBM should have been the ones to do, but there's a very important meeting that they had in not getting the licensing locked down on why they couldn't, because they thought it would be in the hardware. And they were wrong. But that's it. So anyway.
Okay, so that makes 2 points for us, which is A, you don't have to be the person that names the thing to benefit from it, right? If IBM created the PC and Microsoft is known, literally a Windows computer is called a PC, It doesn't matter if you name the thing originally, right? But also, the era of personal computing is a very clear thing that everyone understands, right? Before that, it was business machines. Like literally the name of IBM is International Business Machines, right? So, but moving into the era of personal computing, that is a demonstrable change that if you were pitching at the time, people would be like, oh my God. They would either say, no, there's no way that's happening, or like, oh my God, I see it. It's totally going to happen. When you do that, when you put the label on the thing, you are now talking about the same thing. You now have the beginning of the story has been named, right? We understand what story we're about to hear. It's a story about personal computers, right? It could be, a great one. There's a company I worked on a sales deck for, Leaders Atlas. Their change was the remote work revolution. They did remote team consulting type stuff, leadership management things. And the remote work revolution is a change, right? Uh-oh, it's COVID. Everyone has to work remotely. That change is neutral, right? Most changes are neutral. For some people, changes are bad, and for others, they're good. The change creates opportunity and threats, right? So in the remote work revolution, there's an opportunity for people to take advantage of new ways of managing their teams. And there's a threat for people that don't take advantage of that. And people who do the thing that they used to do, it doesn't work anymore. There's no water cooler knowledge. There's no, shared camaraderie in the office. You have to work harder to get people on the same page. You have to have more meetings to get people to be able to even talk to each other, because Slack communication is different, right? Okay. We've established winners and losers, right? If you're a winner, and we labeled these identities as, in this case, leaders versus bosses. So we gave them a negative identity. Nobody wants to be thought of as the boss. You want to be thought of as a leader, right? So there's an identity to move towards and an identity to move away from, right? Leaders will adapt to challenges. Bosses will do the same old thing, and then they have to hire change management consultants to figure out why their shit isn't working, right? You move through that, and now we have a story, and you have a role, and you have something to avoid, right? Okay, now we're on the same page. Now we know what we're talking about. From there, if they agreed with all your premises, then you can propose a solution, which is, here's what a leader would do. A leader would get our system, which helps you build the internal team database of shared common knowledge, so you can replace water cooler knowledge, and it helps you manage your team by tracking their sentiment across stuff and whatever. And all of those features that we're discussing address problems that we set up earlier according to the rule of three, right? So those three pieces of opportunity often are related to the three problems. The three problems come in as three features and three benefits, right? And when you do this, you make it really easy for someone to walk out of the pitch and remember what you pitched them. Because this, in a perfect world, your pitch should never, ever, ever go over 20 minutes. But sometimes it's, 10, 15, 20 minutes of pitching, and then it's 40 minutes of questions, right? So when you can continuously bring it back to three things that they need to know when they leave the room, right? Do they know the story? Do they know the way that your product or service solves the problem posed in the story? And do you have the team that's able to take it to a large enough market to be successful, right? If they understand that, you're good. That's it, right?
So I want to go back to a point that I feel, because I now have this sixth sense where I can now figure out where objections kind of pop up. And I can see an objection coming up here for us. I haven't heard this one, but this feels like one here is but Garrett, what if the change isn't big enough? Or what if the change is not a significant enough or whatever? Because again, I brought up the AI revolution. Ooh, sexy, right? It's oh, the personal computer revolution. Do this, right? What if ours is not as interesting or not as useful or whatever, right? And so there's something important here that I think people who are starting companies need to recognize. And I think this is why this format is so effective to do that. I'm not saying this is the only deck format you can use to get a good result, right? I'm sure there are alternatives, but this one is super effective because it already lines up with something else important, which is the reason your startup exists in the first place. And this is now getting down to business philosophy, right? Is I'm an individual who's in the world, and something happened in the world, right? There's some fundamental change that took place that means that there's now a inconsistency, right? Or whatever. And so let's take, we'll use AI as an example, right? Let's say, for example, can see AI is now a thing that exists in the world. And I see salespeople are really, really struggling with calls, right? There's an opportunity. And Garrett, this is one idea you and I bounced around, right? Which is they're having sales calls. They're clearly not, there's a lot of people who are not doing super well, right? Small percentage are doing well. Others are not doing so well. And it seems like if we're doing video calls and we're doing sales calls and we're on the phone, it seems like we can take that information and we can analyze it and we can start to get ideas of what's effective, what's not effective, or whatever. And it's like, well, geez, if we take a call center, take all those scripts, analyze them, and then spit out, here's the most effective, here's the least effective, and here's a better script that you can get out of it. That's a really cool idea, right? But notice what I've just done there in this hypothetical. I'm staring at the world. Here's this fundamental change that take place. Here's this group of people I can impact. And if I build this better tool, they're going to get out to the promised land. That is how most good startups should be thinking about. Not exactly for that idea, but your startup exists because a change is taking place, right? Imagine if that didn't exist, right? Imagine if that was. Imagine you were saying to, oh no, I just, there's no real big change, right? I just thought it'd be cool to play with AI. And yeah, now I built this thing, right? No one would really look at it and go and say, have fun, right, to do this, right? Most ideas are there. So I guess what I would encourage you in my hypothetical question, I use to tee this up, which is if you're struggling to find the big need, either one, you're not thinking about it right, in which case come talk to us, or two, I'm not worried about your pitch at that point if you can't think of the big change, right, or having trouble doing it. I'm worried about your company. I'm worried should the company exist. If there is no big evolutionary change or there's nothing you can point to say, this change, these people could be better served, my company serves them better, and you can't explain that, that kind of tells me maybe the company's not worth starting to begin with and you need to be spending your time elsewhere.
Yeah, I would say, like, think about it this way. We make money where the market is inefficient, right? And I'm using the royal. Everyone makes profit most where there are market inefficiencies. If in a perfectly efficient market, there's no opportunity, right? So let's say like Brian and I are both lawn chair manufacturers, right? And Brian starts out and he makes a $10 handmade lawn chair. It's like wood and it's varnished. It's nice, or maybe it's $100, whatever, right? I come into the market and I see that that's inefficient. There is I could cut the margins and make, more chairs for cheaper, right? Okay, I cut the margins down to $80. I have a hardwood chair, but it's not varnished or something. I made it cheaper, right? Cool. Now we have started a race to the bottom towards efficiency, right? And at the end of the line, we do this, back and forth, cutting. And at the end of the line, we have those shitty plastic chairs that break when you sit in them, that everyone knows what I'm talking about. They sell at Walmart. They cost like $1, right?
Yep.
The profit margins on those is probably minuscule, and it probably cannot be decreased anymore. It has been cut. So as the chair market has become perfectly efficient, we figured the cheapest possible chair and maximize and optimize everything, right? There's no longer opportunity here unless you could do something changes. In this case, it'd have to be probably a technological change where you can find, we figured out how to make cheap carbon nanofibers. Now we made an even cheaper chair, right? So the opportunity comes from the inefficiency, and the inefficiency comes from a change. Because pricing is always moving, right? It's, when prices are moving, the pricing is inefficient, right? If supply goes up, demand goes down, right? Whatever, all the there's this like fluid kind of thing. And when you're pitching your startup, you are attempting to capitalize on an inefficiency that exists. The inefficiency comes from a change, right? So that might have been too technical for like where we're going, but like that is the way that I look at it, is where are you finding opportunities that come from change, and explaining that. You basically it's like what you're actually doing is a lot like explaining when they're going to go blow up the Death Star in Star Wars, right? They're like, okay, well, we have to do this and this and this, but we have the plans and we have a chance that we can get in. And if we do exactly this thing, then we're going to blow up the Death Star, right? And then they're like, oh, it's so crazy, it just might work, right?
Right.
That's the feeling that you should be giving someone when they're listening to you. They're a co-conspirator in a story that nobody else gets, right? It's a secret story that you're sharing with them. You're looking for someone that's also down for a risky mission to go blow up the Death Star. But if they're like, oh my God, we could actually do it. We can make a unicorn. We could capture 1% of this giant market. That's what you're trying to make.
Oh, okay. I don't,
oh my God, I see it. I see a path to blow up.
I need to pause you here. You need to remember this because that is probably one of the most compelling ways we have to talk about. I'm even like talking beyond the live stream at this point. That point you made there about like, that is such a good point, and that's such a great way to frame it with these venture capital. Because okay, so let me rattle off here. So this is me going. I mean, we're not really on script here, whatever. But let me brainstorm this. A lot of the problem that people have when they go and pitch is that they're basically, you know, here I have to go grab my hat here. Hat in hand, please, sir, can you give me $3.5 million, right? That's the mentality so many people have when trying to raise, right? And what they do. And again, there's like, I understand why they're that way, right? Because I know the market, I know what they're trying to do. They've often got the shit kicked out of them, right? You know, in the market. So they kind of go through and say, oh, we really need to do this. That's a really weak position to take. That's a really weak position. And oh, by the way, remember, we're in the irrational land, right? We're not in a hyper rational place here right now. So those subtle signals, whatever, we're like, oh, I'm not super confident, whatever, they get read, and that gets read as less money in your bank, right? That goes from, oh, I could give you $1 million to maybe more like $500,000. I'm not even sure if I want to give them a quarter at this point, right? Little stuff like that definitely impacts them. The framing of you're enrolling the investor into as a co-conspirator is a so much more powerful position. And the fact is that the way we do our pitches, again, what we do, which again is designed from this concept of business philosophy, and it's all downstream from that, is here's this big change not many people realize is here, right? For a lot of companies, like most companies don't necessarily get the luxury of being able to do that, be able to say.
So what I would say on that, just briefly, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that not everyone understands, right? But your angle on it is the unique part, right?
Yeah, right.
AI, for example, you're not going to walk in and pitch, oh my God, did you know that there's an AI revolution happening right now? Everyone knows. Like that's not prohibitive, right? What you need is to like either you're teaching them about it or you're labeling something that already exists, but you both just need to agree that this change is happening. And then you're giving them conclusions about this change that if they agree with, your product is a logical next step, right?
Right.
Downstream from a series of yeses that you've agreed on, right? So you're saying, hey, do you think the Death Star is bad? They say, yeah. Do you think it would be awesome if we blew up the Death Star? They say, yeah. So do you think these are the plans to the Death Star? They're like, oh my God, yeah, how'd you get those? Don't worry about
it. Don't worry about it.
Do you think that the plan I'm about to tell you where we do this would work? They said, well, maybe it would work. Okay. If all those things are true, we can blow up the Death Star. They're like, yeah, we could. Now you're enrolled, right? Now you're in the conspiracy. Part of this, though, is that you have to change your perspective from I am trying to get people to give me money to I am trying to weed out bad fits, right? You are not like getting an investor is like getting married, but potentially worse.
Much worse.
At least
they're trying. They're only there for the money.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and
as opposed to being mostly certain they're only there for.
Yeah, you hope ideally your spouse is supposed to be there because you like them. Your investors liking them is not. It would help, but it's not a prerequisite for them giving you money, right? So, a
lot of money has been made with venture capitalists you absolutely fucking despise, and you kind of both need each other for some reason.
Right. So I think in that light, it's important to understand, like you are vetting out people. You don't want the wrong investor. You can't bring someone into your Death Star plan that's a rat, that doesn't help you. And in fact, maybe then you get turned into like you get roasted by Palpatine or something, right? I don't know, whatever your consequence.
I think the analogy is lose it at Steve at this point. But actually, the one part of the Death Star, honestly, that seems like my LinkedIn slop post or whatever for you for next week is thinking about that idea of, because the part for me, it's like, wait, how'd you get those Death Star thing? Don't worry about it, right? There should be a point in every good pitch where that moment happens, where it's like, how in the hell, like pretty much like I remember I read a book a while ago that I really like because I think it's true, which is most successful people have some crazy stupid advantage that is not replicatable, not something you can go off and do. Like there's no like it's very rare to have somebody who has zero advantages coming out and ended up like finding their way right, do that. And I'm not saying it's like genetic, right? It's like obviously like, if you're successful in like having rich parents is a really good thing to have. Being a genetic freak, right, who's like 7, 8 feet tall is a really good thing to have. Being somebody who has some mental, like a very, very high IQ is an unfair advantage, right? Those don't necessarily mean you're going to be successful, but a high percentage of people who are successful have some sort of like, unfair advantage, right? The unfair advantage in your analogy with the Death Star is we know the map. We know exactly what it looks like. That's the unfair. If somebody had to go get that unfair advantage, but now they kind of have it. When you're pitching, especially when you get to the seed round, right? The people we deal with, seed or A, which is there should be something behind the scenes here on that answers the question, why are you going to succeed where others aren't? And it's like patently obvious there, right? Like a plan to destroy the Death Star that does not have the map where we don't know is much less likely to inspire confidence or succeed than one where we know exactly what the map looks like. By the same token, like literally like if I were starting an AI startup, right? And I said, oh, and by the way, the lead engineer who's been working for OpenAI for the last 6 years, or this person, you may not know his name, but you know their work, right? Well, he just joined our company, right? That's a holy shit, how did you get that? Don't worry about it moment, right? But it's one of those things that make you go, oh, that's a thing that I can point to here. Or like one of our clients recently was fluid dynamics organization, right? One of their things they have in their back pocket is, oh, a Fortune 100 company is one of our clients. How the hell did you do that? Don't worry about it, but it's true, right? That's that thing. Something there should be that moment. And I thought that's if you don't have that, it doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. It's just not as cool, right?
Yeah, people often call this secret sauce. Right. It's turns out a lot of times your secret sauce is just like, Thousand Island. But the point is, if you don't tell people it's Thousand Island, you can still call it secret sauce. So it doesn't even necessarily have to be like the trick is pretty much all the companies we work with have had something like this and they have not been looking at it correctly. So like with the Boson QSI, BQP, the computational fluid dynamics modeling startup, they did not emphasize the first time that they pitched us that their product, when applied, saves you 1 to 2 years of aircraft development and $1 to $2 billion, right? So that was the thing. They just like kind of casually said that in the pitch. It wasn't a point of emphasis. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, what?
Right.
So this is the thing that I always see over and over again with technical founders is technical founders don't know what makes the cool parts cool. What they think is cool as a technical founder is usually something that no one cares about. You're like, oh my God, did you see on the inside of the circuit board, we have this like PCIe connector that connects this to that? And like no one knows what that is. No one cares. I do not know what the inside of my computer looks like. It is not important for me to know what the inside of my computer looks like for me to use my computer, right? However, if it turns out that inside my computer, there are now 8 times as much RAM, then I have a much better computer, right? So what does that mean? Does it mean tell me about the RAM, or does it say this is 8 times faster than everything else on the market, right?
Right.
That's a huge value prop, and that's now exciting and new, right? And so I think that's the thing where technical founders really just they get so in the weeds. They are so obsessed with all the cool little bits and how it works and all that stuff that they miss what does it do that's cool? What does it do to someone for someone that doesn't understand how it works, right? I'm just going to keep beating that to death because that is just consistently, that is the thing that people need to work on, right? Is whatever excites your engineers is probably not what you should be pitching with.
No, I mean, like, and that's the thing too, where it's like the other part here is that now I don't usually recommend this, right? But like the thing that the investor gets excited at can actually be something separate from what everyone else is excited about inside the company and naturally will, especially in the realm of really technical, really complicated products, right? You're often going to mismatch about this. And this is, again, another client of ours has like absolutely ludicrous, crazy plan. Not ludicrous in the sense it'll never work, but ludicrous in the sense that I can't believe this exists out to this level of detail for the next like 10 years of development, right? You know, and whatever, it's a genomics company, right? And the fact is, when she goes to pitch, a lot of her is trying to pitch like the really, really, really big vision of this thing, which is awe-inspiring but overwhelming, right? And Garrett, I think you kind of agree, you would agree with that, right? To kind of go into those details versus the investors, while wanting to see that, also may want to see what's going to happen tomorrow, right? Or the next couple of years, right? Sometimes it goes out. So like you can have a mismatch between what the investors expect and what the company does, so long as everyone ends up in the same place where we're all making money, right? Ultimately, that's what investors care about. Yeah, Garrett?
Yeah, so to that point, generally the way that you have what I would consider to be paradoxical demands, right? Contradictory demands. Investors want you to focus on one thing that you can crush. Investors want you to have a big giant vision. These are contradictory, right? Here's the trick. The way that you get around this is your pitch needs to work based on one product or one buyer or one market segment or one angle. You need to have one way to shoot to blow up the Death Star. You say, hey, we have 50 ways we could blow up the Death Star. They're like, okay, but how do you pick? Right? Are any of them good? Like, we don't know. There has to be one, right? In your pitch, focus on exactly one pathway to victory. You can have, if your go-to-market might have like a three-pronged approach or something like that, but it's tight. Hey, we're doing B2B, we're doing referral, we're doing cold outreach or something like that, right? But at the end of the deck, what I like to do is what I call the aspirational slide. So after you have asked for money, which is usually, I put as far back in the deck as you can. Sometimes you have to have stuff after that, like,
right.
Maybe it's your cap table, maybe it's your roadmap, maybe it's your use of funds, whatever. But I like to end on an aspirational slide where you say, and not only all that stuff we just talked about, but also we could do this too. And so if you look at the way like Steve Jobs pitches when he's presented everything, he said at the end he says one more thing, and then he tells you the really cool part, right?
Right.
So at the end of your deck, you can say, and I know you guys thought that was cool, we're doing all that, but here's what it looks like after, or here's the next 10 years, or here's some other thing. So you can end on that aspirational note, because if you've gotten through your one angle of attack, you have convinced them. And then after you've done that, you can add on the extra stuff and make it even more exciting, right? But if you try to pitch the whole thing at once, then oftentimes you end up feeling like you haven't succeeded in any of your angles of attack, and it's very vague and unfocused. So this is how you get around that contradictory set of asks from VCs.
Excellent. We could probably go for another 3 hours on this subject. We
Yeah.
probably will. We do. So I think that's about the time though today.
Yeah. This is great.
Excellent.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all for coming out. As always, we're Lucid. If you need help with pitching, we are awesome at it. Over 50% of the people that we work with have raised. Statistically, 0.5% of people that attempt to raise will raise. So now that's specifically for technical founders with very complicated products in the B2B space. We're not like,
we're very niche down, and we're very
happy to talk to you about your deck, but that is generally who needs our help the most. So if you are one of those people, we can help you. If not, we can probably still help you too. So feel free to reach out. But otherwise, we'll see you next week. Later.